Just in case you are just joining us, the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, has declared the presidential candidate of the All Progressives Congress, APC, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, as the winner of the 2023 presidential election. The chairman of INEC, Professor Mahmood Yakubu, declared Tinubu the winner at exactly 4:10 a.m. today in Abuja. The former Lagos State governor polled a total vote of 8,794,726 to defeat his closest rival and the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, Atiku Abubakar, who scored 6,984,520 votes, and Peter Obi of Labour Party, who polled 6,101,533 votes. The presidential candidate of the new Nigerian People's Party, NNPP, Rabiu Kwankwanso, came a distant fourth with the total votes of 1,496,687 votes. The president-elect, Bola Ahmed Tinubu of the All Progressives Congress, while addressing the press, called for unity and collaboration with other party candidates. The former Lagos State governor thanked all those who participated in the February 25 election, with particular mention of articulated, obedient, ratified, and Kwankwansiya supporters. Now joining us to continue the conversation on Tinubu's victory and Nigeria decides 2023, especially the constitutional requirements for the declaration of the president-elect, is Abiodun Owonikoko, a senior advocate of Nigeria. Welcome to the show, and thank you very much for joining us, AJ Owonikoko.
Good morning, Dr. Abati.
Good morning. Well, quickly.
Good morning, madam.
Morning, sir.
Morning. Good to see you in person.
There's been so much controversy. As you know, overnight, lawyers have been arguing back and forth about the appropriate interpretation of Section 134, whether it's to be read conjunctively or disjunctively, whether the winner has to get 25% of total votes cast in the FCT or not, with Bola Ahmed Tinubu of the APC getting 18.8% in the Federal Capital Territory. Well, what is the, in your view, what is the position of the law? You haven't been the first man to test this 1999 Constitution, when in 2003 you took the case MD Yusuf versus Obasanjo to court. Your take?
Let me first say that Nigerians are all congratulated for going through this process and reaching a conclusion. Election always involves possibilities. And as Democrats, we must be prepared as we start for any outcome and live with it for a short period of time. So congratulations to the winning team. Congratulations to those who posed a very effective challenge. And also, the manner in which the victor emerged, in my own view, is a testimony to the wisdom of the drafters of our Constitution. The combined vote of the losing candidates drowns that of the winner. That tells you that this country actually is more united than we ever normally admit. None of the parties, candidates that did well could attribute his success to having his own immediate part of the country adopting him. If you look at the performance of Peter Obi, it's the most diverse evidence of acceptability in terms of geographical spread and all other forms of diversity. You cannot say that pulling that kind of weight in Taraba, Benue, Nasarawa, Lagos, Abuja, for somebody that ordinarily was thought to be just an Igbo candidate, is not a big feat. So I congratulate Mr. Peter Obi. Again, look at the winner. Contrary to what people thought, the success card of his victory actually did not come from Southwest. If you had lost Lagos and lost Kano, ordinarily people would have written you off. His success came from having a broad spectrum of support across different fault lines. That also means that any of those three, if he had won, will have actually be representative of the various tendencies in the country. That said, what Doctor has asked is the relevance of having a national acceptability in order for you to become a president of Nigeria. Section 134 of the Constitution deals with how a winner in presidential election will emerge, either at first ballot or through a runoff. But the threshold of victory is having first majority of votes and a quarter of votes cast in each of at least 2/3 of the states of the Federation and Abuja. You will realize that in 1979, the Constitution did not have any provision for Abuja, even though by law, Abuja had been created. But capital of the country had not moved. When the capital moved around 1991, there was no constitution in terms of regulating presidential election. It was in 1999 that this 1999 constitution was promulgated, and they had to they had to quickly address the status of Abuja by adding "and FCT" into the requirement of spread. The question now is, in order for you to meet the threshold of 2/3 of states, is Abuja a state? And if it's a state, is it a state that has to be given an extraordinary status for you to demonstrate that if you are going to be ruling from Abuja, you at least have 25% of support base there? The truth, as we can see from the authorities, is that Abuja is not a state, but it is deemed to be a state for the purpose of determining your spread as a successful presidential candidate. Abuja, if you look at how it emerged, can be compared to Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. America is not a state. It's not part of a state. In fact, it was excised from 3 states. And because of that, Washingtonians are ordinarily disenfranchised in elections until much later. In Washington, they have 3 electors like every other state, but they have no additional elector. And the only member of Congress from Washington is a non-voting member of Congress. So when we decided to use Abuja as a replica of Washington, our own history informed us that for the purpose that we wanted to achieve, we must treat it as a state, since Abuja was meant not to belong to any ethnic group. The original settlers were resettled, and it was supposed to be an open field for every Nigerian citizen. So it may not be unexpected that some people will believe that Abuja belongs to some people, and therefore they must have that special protection. Abuja, unfortunately, is not is the only Abuja you can call no man's land in Nigeria, because it belongs to all of us. Some states sacrificed. Kwara sacrificed, Plateau sacrificed, and I think another is Nasarawa. They sacrificed their land and their citizens for us to have a central home land for every Nigerian. So it may not be the correct view to think that Abuja is a state that belongs to certain people, and that not only that, you must score 25%. If that were to be so, everybody would begin to mass up in Abuja so that they can gain electoral advantage. Every voter in Nigeria has a quality of vote that every other person has. So for you to become president of Nigeria, if you have 25 states excluding Abuja, and you don't even have one single vote in Abuja, you are home and dry. If you have 24 states and you have Abuja in addition, you are home and dry. So Abuja for election purpose is just like another state. So the same requirement that you need to satisfy as a threshold in Nasarawa, in Kogi, in Anambra is what you satisfy in Abuja.
All right. Okay, so Mr. Owonikoko, your explanation is clear. So what you're saying is that in layman's terms, 25% of 24 states, and Abuja is part of the state you mentioned.
For the purpose of return of the presidential candidate at
now,
election.
just before the election, another SAN, Mr. Dr. Olisagbakoba, had actually asked INEC, written to the INEC chair, to clarify its position, because it was required, because it had caused a number of debates, and that's what's playing out now. Unfortunately, the INEC chair hasn't responded, and even when they announced the winner of the presidential election, he didn't still clarify the position of the commission so as to put to rest these debates. How do you then justify conversations? Because we had Dr. Amadi and Dr. Bati himself had also tried to look at the "and" in that section of the Constitution as to whether the "and" was tying both together or saying one was independent of the other. So FCT, how do you then speak to people who are of the opinion that the "and" suggests that FCT was meant to stand alone? And even going back to what you just said now, that because the president he's one who appoints the minister for the FCT, so he's seen as, in quotes, a governor. He governs the FCT. Therefore, he needs to have more of a spread in that state, in that place, since he would be directly governing governing the FCT. What do you have to say to people who bring forth these arguments? Because it doesn't answer that question.
Now, we have to understand why there is requirement of plurality of majority and spread. Plurality of majority deals with individual voters' value of his franchise. Spread has to do with recognition of our diversity. So the issue of diversity does not arise in Abuja because of the history of how it emerged. If it was Lagos, and Nigeria's capital was still in Lagos, which was actually one of the reasons why we had to move capital, because Lagos belonged to some sector, some segment of the country, traditionally. And apart from the issue of the thing having overgrown possible development, we felt we needed to have a part of the territory of the country that everybody could feel a sense of belonging in. So if you want to reintroduce that same concept, we'll be recreating a new Lagos in Abuja. So, and I explained why that provision was introduced. It was a last-minute realization that we are going into a new democratic order, and our requirement for constitutional democracy will suggest that if you want to determine who wins a presidential election, we cannot ignore Abuja. So it's just like a last-minute thing, and FCT. If you look at the language of the law, it says you must have scored at least 25%, a quarter. In fact, the word is quarter of the total vote cast in each of at least 2/3 of the states of the federation. And then, full stop. But I think somebody reminded them and said, and FCT was added. But if it has said, if you have to score 1/4 of votes cast in each of the states of the federation and in Abuja. You see, it didn't say, it just said and FCT, it didn't say and in Abuja. That will be separating Abuja from the rest. So it just added Abuja as one of the territories you have to take into account. And that's why it may be unsafe for us to begin to make a case that you have to have a special threshold of vote capture in Abuja before you become president of Nigeria. Otherwise, Abuja would then be exercising veto on the mandate that the rest of the country of about 80-something million people will have cast.
But there's also another argument to that extent that Abuja is different from FCT. Abuja is a part in FCT, the Federal Capital Territory.
In the Constitution is FCT.
In this Constitution, it's Federal Capital Territory. Yes. And we all know that Abuja, the word Abuja is an almanac for the areas that make up the Federal Capital Territory.
The
six area councils that make up. That's what the first names of all of this area make up Abuja, the word Abuja itself. So the question will be, some other people argue that the drafters of the Constitution made an argument of the fact that if you get a spread in other parts of the country, which is like our own electoral college, and Abuja, you don't get a spread, it's indicative the fact that you have not totally satisfied the requirement, because Abuja is supposed to be a melting pot. And like you've argued rightly, that it is somewhere that everybody comes into. So if that place that is sort of like a new Nigeria, that is no man's land, everybody comes into, you must be able to get a sizable spread there. That's one question. The second question I would like to ask you is about INEC, BVAS, and breaking the law and transmission. I want you to throw some more clarity as regards that issue also. And this other part, because it's also lawyers like you that I have, tried to hear their argument, that make this argument.
Okay. I think to just close out on the Abuja issue, we must appreciate that when we talk about constitutional construction, history is always a good guide. We must know why was Abuja created and what is the purpose of including representation in Abuja as part of the evidence that you have national acceptability. That's actually the whole idea. That, in fact, it makes your job easier. You have a smaller territory, you have a catchment area, you can focus your campaign there and be sure you get 25. If people had been aware or were of the view that you needed to have 25% in Abuja, in fact, the majority of campaign will have been in Abuja. They will actually even targeted individual voters because you can do laser target in Abuja. You can tell whoever.
But they didn't know it was going to come to
nobody.
this.
We didn't have a kind of competitive election.
So
horse race.
Nobody knew it was going to come
exactly.
to this.
And that's the beauty of what we see in this election. You see, a number of things that we never tested in our constitution are being thrown up. Just like, and so for that reason, Nigerians will appreciate. I know that people who are originally indigenous in Abuja, sometimes they get rancor when we say these kind of things. But the history of how Abuja emerged justify this one, that it's meant to be everybody's land. But if we begin to scramble for control on the basis of ethnicity, religion, then we are going to have a problem in Abuja. So it's best for the country that even this interpretation should be the one that if it becomes a litigation matter, the court adopts. So that everybody will feel that, look, you are not at any disadvantage by not being an indigene of Abuja for the purpose of contesting for election. That said, now for the beavers, the interesting thing I observed people did not pay attention to was an interview granted by Professor Yakubu around Wednesday before the election. He clarified that INEC was not going to, he didn't say that before Osun, Ekiti or Anambra. He said it only 3 days to this election and said INEC was not going to electronically transmit election results. I don't know why he had to say that. But he said he learned from the experience of Osun after the judgment and that the election results would not be electronically transmitted, but that the presiding officer will have to snap and use the beavers to transmit a copy and then bring the physical copy to the collation center. Now, when I heard that, I was a bit curious why he needed to sound that warning. Because people's expectations were high. A lot of people's belief in this election was on the transparency and credibility that beavers appeared to have thrown into the fray. So when he said that, I got the impression that they learned a bit of lesson from what happened in Osun, and they wanted to avoid that. Because he said, he cited the reason was that, you know, it's a lot easier to hack electronic recording and transmission of results than to just snap a physical document that we can always compare at the collation center. So I don't know whether they will come up later to actually confess to Nigerians that they had challenge of hacking in this election. And I thought they decided not to take the risk with the presidential. I don't believe that there was any technical breach. I believe it was a deliberate decision by INEC to avoid controversy with regard to presidential election, that they prevented transmission, this is my personal belief, of presidential election results. But they could take the risk of front-load House of Assembly. It will just be a limited constituency that you can fight over without the whole country being put under suspense. That's my personal belief. So, what is now the legal implication of that? You have to go back to Section 50 of the Electoral Act. And that Section 50 says that INEC shall, after counting of votes, transmit the results either physically or by any means that by their regulation they consider fit. That means it's no longer a statutory obligation on INEC, but they have a discretion as to alternative by which they could transmit the result. But you go to their own regulation, the INEC guideline itself, that's in their paragraph 38. You have two steps there. The first step was actually disused in this election. The second step, which is about uploading, that the people are now insisting that was not complied with. So it is a breach of, if I thought there was anything, a breach of the regulation rather than a breach of the act. And then you have to now factor in what the Electoral Act provides for in the case of non-compliance with regulation as against non-compliance with the act. So I thought they took what they believe was a safer bet by now taking refuge under Section 135 and Section 149 of the Electoral Act. Under 135, a complaint about breach of regulation, unless it can be shown to be substantial and to have substantially affected the result, will not invalidate an election. And when you look at the only ground I see now as being viable to challenge this election, you have to be complaining about non-compliance. There are only 3 grounds on which you can challenge an election. It's either you complain about non-qualification of the candidate, or you complain about corrupt practices and non-compliance, or you complain about non-securing of majority of votes. In this case, it is very clear, subject to what happens eventually when people do their own audit, that a majority of votes has been established, the spread has been established, subject to what the court will say upon review. But what you cannot say is whether there has been a form of non-compliance that is substantial, so that the result of the election cannot stand. Now, this is the biggest hurdle you can have in election petition. In fact, it's almost impossible to cross that hurdle. And so that's why, when I saw this game going on, I concluded that the target of this protest is not INEC. The target of this protest is about people's lack of trust in the dispute resolution mechanism by which they can ventilate their grievance in this election. That is, they are not trusting in the court system to do justice, supposing this develops into a litigation. So the Supreme Court, which is the final court, should please take note of what the people's grievance is. That was why they will feel that they were safer for chairman of INEC himself to decide their dispute for them, or President Buhari, rather than going to... Why would, in a country of rule of law, why should people feel that way? There must be something that we have not addressed. People's trust in the education system of election petition has waned, maybe because of some of the things we have seen in recent past.
Of the Supreme Court.
So they are afraid, because they already know the story of what will happen if this is the only ground on which we can challenge the election. So I believe that our courts should be allowed to see that whatever complaint comes out of this election, it is given due consideration and is determined on the merit. So, but then, my happiness about what is happening is that people have not observed. For the first time, we are going to a new government with 10 vacancies in the Supreme Court. 10 vacancies. American election petitions sometimes are won and lost just because a president will have a chance to appoint 1 or 2 judges of Supreme Court. In this election, out of 21 full complaints of Supreme Court, we have only 11. There are 10 to be filled. It is enough for anybody coming to power now, if you want to reform the justice system, to take advantage of that. What does that mean? I'm happy that we are going to have Labour Party in the Senate. They are going to challenge anybody coming as a nominee to be appointed a justice of Supreme Court. It will not be a matter of take a bow. So these are the things now that they should exploit to justify the confidence Nigerians repose in having a robust opposition in our governance system. So if people don't know this, if Labour just decided that all they will achieve in the next dispensation to ensure that the quality of people that will go to Supreme Court and then populate and become majority there are those that Nigerians can have believe in, to dilute what we have there now, we will have achieved a lot. Because from then, everybody will feel confident and safe that if I have a dispute, we have an independent and trusted judiciary that can resolve it.
Okay, I read your piece titled, "Who is Afraid of the Supreme Court?"
Thank you.
And the question is, as the Supreme Court of Nigeria so badly acquitted itself, that the ordinary man doesn't think that either at the Supreme Court level or anywhere else, you can be sure of justice. And in that regard, what do you think, therefore, of the request by certain persons saying, let's cancel the election, annul the election, call for fresh election, from President Olusegun Obasanjo to the PDP, NMPP, AAC, Labour Party? That's their position. Second, there's another election on March 11, gubernatorial and House of Assembly. What do you think are the implications of what may have transpired so far for the integrity even of that March 11 process?
Well, I think the first thing is to restore trust, because we will lose a lot of mileage if the young people that troop out on 24th of February feel dissolution so that they don't turn out on the 11th. INEC has to come out clean about the real reason why people were able to upload senatorial election results, House of Reps, and they could not upload presidential until much later. I think as at this morning, is still under 80% of the results for president that are uploaded. But you can appreciate, I've seen you interrogating the technology of it. But I have to appreciate the point that if you want to access presidential election results from 176,000 polling units, if everybody in Nigeria at the same time are trying to jam that thing, you are going to have a bandwidth challenge. Unlike when I'm interested in knowing who became House of Reps member in my community, you are probably looking at maybe 34,000 people trying to access the portal. So INEC must, in order to regain the confidence with which they went into the election ahead of the next election, please come out openly and tell Nigerians why, from their own internal investigation, it was impossible to upload presidential election results, because by their regulations, the PO was supposed to upload that result with the Beavers machine by scanning it, not by entering the details in the system. So if it was something that was general, that's why I was convinced that there must have been a conscious decision to make sure that did not happen, because I cannot recall that there was single polling unit as at the time of election that they were able to upload. I voted, and I know that we were having problem when we were insisted that they had to upload, and they told us that they could not. And we found out that from about 3 or 4 nearby polling stations, it was the same expense. So it wasn't as if that particular polling unit person was playing a game. And later, the information came out, and INEC also came up with a circular explaining that yes, they had some challenge. But I'm saying that we have to be honest with ourselves. If you have a problem, let us admit it. I don't think this is about rigging the election. I don't think so. Because under this Electoral Act, it is the polling unit officer that has authority to cancel election. Before, you used to take it to the collation level, to higher level before you can cancel. Under this law, the polling unit agent and polling unit of presiding officer is the one authorized to cancel election where there has been either bypass of beavers or there is overvoting. So when people were asking the chairman of INEC at the national level to cancel, they were actually asking to do the impossible. And it's a good thing that despite the call for cancellation, we saw it through. That then kicks in section 149 of the Electoral Act and says that once INEC takes that decision, only the tribunal or court can review it. The issue about the INEC reviewing the process, I think it was premature. It was not the returning officer that could review the complaint. It was the commission. So if election result has not been declared, you cannot review it, even administratively. So it was a good thing that they managed to ensure that all the results came in. We now know who is putative winner. And then the INEC, before petition itself, if they want to be open with Nigerians, even if the outcome will be the same, they should let us see that, given the gamut of protest, they did the internal, self-cleansing, and they found out, look, from all we can see, there is nothing substantial that will enable us to take over the role of a court. This is a matter that's left for the court. Because look at it, people do not appreciate that because of the interest in this election, a lot of young, articulate people participated. So when for the first time they are seeing debauchery at polling station, they thought it was a new thing. It is the normal way that the election had been done here until we got these quality young people who want the best for Nigeria participating. So they were alarmed, they were, they were traumatized. Some of these chaps don't even go out without a bodyguard or something. They now went to police thinking that it's like America, and they saw thugs breaking bottle. Well, they saw people snatching ballot boxes. They can't imagine it. So they thought, but that's not something that those of us who they want to displace have not been used to. We are used to it, but we are saying it must change. And we are happy that these children are forcing us. In our own house, I'm sure all of us here, your children are probably not thinking like you about this election, regardless of what explanation. But afterwards, when we allow the thing to go through the process and explain to them, they will appreciate that, look, democracy is a process. And with time, we continue to refine and fine-tune it and get better. This time, one of the achievements we have done is to ensure that it is impossible for anybody to allocate vote without somebody at least attempting to vote. What used to happen, I don't want to mention him, but I know that I've been involved in so many election petitions. There is a particular state in the East. Only one local government in that state. INEC doesn't conduct election there. On the Friday to election, they will ask you to bring all the election materials. And they have to come back on Sunday to collect the result. Are you telling me? Now, that is not possible now because without the use of beavers, somebody physically making use of his thumbprint and being accredited, you can't generate a result from their place. Right. And in this election, that is impossible. That's a massive improvement of what we used to have, because before you could hijack INEC material, go into a room and thumbprint.
But there were many reports of ballot snatching,
Yes.
of ballot boxes being set ablaze, videos all over the place of underage voting, not just in Kano, but in other parts of the country as well. And also, INEC officials, thumbprinting ballot papers, and even police vehicles being used to go and disrupt the election. So you're saying that in spite of all of that, there is, on the surface of it, substantial compliance.
No, that's not what I'm saying. No, what I'm saying is that those kind of complaints come under non-compliance, and you have to prove it at every polling unit, and then show how it affected. Now, where that is a danger to this election result is how forensic opposition are in trying to review and audit the outcome, because the confirmation that there is a spread is based on the belief that the results from those states are correct. If I can chip off some of the votes recorded by a particular candidate, if I was going to be a petitioner in this election petition, and I don't think it's likely to be the case, all I will look for, because of the closeness of the matter, I will identify how many states do I need to attack to show that the winner did not win 25%. I don't have to bother about the majority votes. If the winner had 25 or 25 states, all I need to establish is disprove 3 states where he allegedly got 25%, and then his election will have to be overturned. I don't know whether you get what I'm saying.
I get your point.
So it's a game of masters who appreciate how this is done. So rather than getting ourselves bogged down, let people sit down. The same way, if I'm the winner, I will not sit back. I will do what I call objection to votes. Because as you are chipping my vote, I'm chipping your vote. So if you knock off 25,000 votes and I knock off, I'm still having 25%. So let people know how this is done.
Yeah.
You understand? That was the problem in Osun. One party was trying to chip into your vote, you kept quiet. And then you are now coming and saying that they also have overvoting, but you didn't challenge those overvoting.
And the court's not for that Christmas.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, thank you so much for brings so much light. But one of the things I wanted to check with you, where you said that only the polling units could cancel an election in that polling unit.
Yes.
The one thing I wanted to ask you was the call for the INEC chair to review the process.
Yes.
So even if he couldn't review the results until there was a final result, could he not have halted the process to review the process based on the number of complaints? I mean, that's one of so the call of the PDP, for instance, through Senator Dino Melaye, was not to cancel the election, but to halt the process and review. Was that within the powers of the INEC chair? Since you mentioned that it's only a polling unit, they could have cancelled the election in its entirety. Okay,
thank you. You see, it will have been the height of professional indiscretion for the returning officer to begin to review the report that is supposed to collate. In the act, that's what I'm explaining. It is not the returning officer as chairman that can review. It is the commission. There are powers of the chairman, there are powers of returning officer, there are powers of the commission. At the commission level, in fact, in this case, having made the return, I will expect that he will recuse himself when they have to review. Because he will be part of those who decision they want to review. So it's even better for the whole system that he concluded the exercise, and then when they decide that there's a case for a review, by the time they are sitting, when it comes to his own decision, he will have to recuse himself. I expect that the commission people will appreciate that, because this review is not supposed to be done in the open. It's an internal quality control process. But even then, to take a decision that affects him, fair hearing will indicate that when they get to that point, he will recuse himself so that they can take an objective and dispassionate decision. So it is not within his power as returning officer to do that review. And it was even premature, because what you want to review is a confirmed result that you want to now test as to whether it is valid or invalid.
Okay, so a lot of people will still, and I will still dabble into this state issue, because I've been seeing a lot of counter arguments. People also cite a section of the Constitution that says even the Constitution, when it talks about FCT, it says treat it as if it is a state.
Yes.
And they're also making the argument to a very large extent that confers, a separate entity on the FCT. But I also want to delve into the electoral laws and the guidelines you talked about. The use of beavers and this IREV is on the guidelines.
Yes.
I can also point you to, on the...
You refer to it?
Yes.
38.
I can also point you to various speeches made by the INEC chief that he said that I will allay the concerns of people as regards the use of, IREV, that it will be used. Also, alluding to your, extraying that your speech, that what you said, that he said 3 days before the election, that I will collate manually and stuff and all of that. On that same day, when it was difficult for people to transmit onto that portal, and INEC was first asked when the collation center opened, they said that they didn't promise anybody that they were going to be transmitting the presidential election. But probably when they saw the reaction, the same INEC now had to issue a counter statement saying that there were technical glitches. The question is, why the flip-flop by INEC? And there are sections of the Constitution that says if you don't follow what you are put in the guidelines, it makes the elections as good as invalid.
Well, let me clarify that. There is actually, our jurisprudence actually says you cannot overturn an election because of non-compliance with guidelines. It's specifically said in section 134 and 135. It has to be an infraction.
Is this not an infraction?
It's an infraction, but it has to be an infraction of the act itself. It's specific provision of the act. The act says they have a discretion. That's the only reason why we are using beavers. Before, there was nothing in the act. They used their regulatory power to introduce electronic method of accreditation.
But there were places where people didn't use beavers to vote.
That's what I'm
saying. So beavers too was infracted.
No, I am agreeing with that one now. Non-use of beavers to vote is a breach of section 47 of the act itself. That is not a regulation. Under this act, you can only be accredited by use of beavers. Do you understand now?
Yes.
So that's a breach of the act. That's why I'm saying that by the time we go into details of these results, forensically, you might be able to target some areas where when you calculate number of places where you can show that beavers, and that is so easy to do. Yes. If you demand for an report.
As you well know, section 49 of the same electoral act uses the word shall.
Yes.
That the returning officer shall comply with the directives, the guidelines offered by the commission. Exactly. He did do so.
Now, with that say, when he does not do so, what is the consequence? He said,
the vote in there is void.
No. Well, if he does not comply with regulations, it's an infraction. But if you show the spread and how it affects the entire election, it might suffice for the court to overturn the election. The reason is that they don't want to use maybe very obvious cases of 30 polling stations in Lagos where people were even killed to overturn the election of the entire 80-something, 20-something million people. That's why they put that. But if it's something that is fundamental, which has to either be based on the Constitution or the Act itself, that may be the end of it.
That section is specific to the polling unit. Not a general.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I say you target that polling unit.
Well, this conversation.
We've got to go. We understand you have a flight to catch.
Thank you very much.
Otherwise, we will have talked about the symbol of political parties with the NMPP, the Labour Party, are both complaining about. But thank you very much.
It's all right. But if you remember Atiku was excluded. 3 days to election, they quickly rushed and they couldn't get the right symbols. Supreme Court said, well, in fact, the only way they got out of that was say, look, you cannot talk about exclusion. I'll be talking about the conduct of election. If you are not there, you won't tell us.
Mr. Owonikoko, you have a flight to catch.
Thank you
very much. We don't want you to miss your flight. Thank you so much for coming.